Ferruccio Lamborghini grew up on a grape farm in a tiny village in northern Italy. His parents were farmers. That was the life he was born into, and probably the life everyone expected him to stay in. But from the time he was a little kid, Ferruccio couldn't stop touching the machines on the farm. While everyone else was picking grapes, he was taking apart engines just to see how they worked. His family actually noticed how obsessed he was, and let him go to a technical school near Bologna instead of staying on the farm. That one decision changed everything. After school, he got drafted into the Italian Air Force during World War II, where he worked as a mechanic. When the war ended, he came home with nothing but mechanical knowledge and a head full of ideas. Italy was in ruins after the war. Farms had no equipment, so Ferruccio did something smart. He started collecting leftover military parts and turning them into tractors. Farmers needed them desperately, and nobody else was making them. Within a few years, Lamborghini Trattori had become one of the biggest tractor companies in Italy. He went from a farmer's son with nothing to a genuinely wealthy man in less than a decade. And with that money, he started buying the things he'd always dreamed about. Fast cars, Ferrari specifically. He owned several of them. But Ferruccio was an engineer, and engineers notice problems. Every Ferrari he owned had the same issue. The clutch kept breaking. Over and over, he'd have to drive all the way to the Ferrari factory in Maranello to get it fixed. It drove him insane. So one day in 1963, he decided to go directly to Enzo Ferrari himself and tell him about the problem. He even had a solution. The clutch Ferrari was using was basically the same one Ferruccio used in his tractors. He knew exactly how to fix it. Ferruccio walked in and explained everything. Enzo Ferrari listened. Then he looked at Ferruccio and said something that would go down in history. "Let me make cars, you stick to making tractors." And then he dismissed him. Ferruccio drove home furious. He was one of the most successful engineers in Italy, a man who had built an empire from war scraps, and Enzo Ferrari had just told him to go back to his farm. On the drive home, he made a decision. If Ferrari wouldn't build the perfect car, he would. He founded Automobili Lamborghini in 1963, and then he did something ruthless. He went and hired Ferrari's own engineers, people Ferrari had recently fired or pushed out. He built his entire team from the people Enzo had thrown away. Within 4 months, they had a working car, not a prototype, an actual car. It debuted at the Turin Motor Show in 1963, and people couldn't believe what they were seeing. It was everything Ferrari wasn't: refined, comfortable, powerful. And then in 1966, Lamborghini released the Miura. It had the engine in the middle of the car behind the driver, something nobody had done before in a production car. It was immediately called the first true supercar in history. The word supercar literally didn't exist before the Miura. Car journalists had to invent a new category just to describe it. Ferrari never publicly acknowledged what Ferruccio had done, but the entire industry knew. A tractor farmer had shown up and redefined what a car could be. Enzo Ferrari never spoke to Ferruccio again. Years later, Ferruccio was asked about it, and he said simply, "He was a great man, I admit, but it was very easy to upset him." The company Ferruccio built eventually ran into trouble in the 70s. The oil crisis killed demand for supercars almost overnight, and he was forced to sell. Lamborghini changed hands several times before ending up with Volkswagen in 1998, which is who owns it today. But none of that changes what Ferruccio actually did. He was a farmer's son who got insulted by the most powerful man in the car industry and responded by building something better. Every Lamborghini you see on the street today exists because one man couldn't let an insult go. Subscribe to Business Ben for more stories like this. I'll see you in the next one.